Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Packaging and Pricing Career Services, presented by Marie Zimenoff. Today's webinar was coordinated by Dr. Sharon Gibbons, the NCDA trustee for private practice, business, industry, and agencies. Feel free to type questions and comments in the chat throughout the webinar. Please know that the chat is set to private, which means only the moderator will see your questions and comments. And my name is Marie Smith. I'm the moderator, so I'll be with you in the chat. Any questions you have will be shared with the presenter later on during the webinar. Let's get started. Packaging and Pricing Career Services with Marie Zimenoff.
Thank you, Marie. It's great to be here. And you'll notice that I have a hoarse voice, so I'll try to minimize the drinking as we go through, but I apologize for that as we get out my slides here. So one of the things that I've learned from doing career services and helping career service professionals for years is that trying to package our career services can feel like we're in a maze. So we can't see above it. We don't know what everyone else is doing, and we feel a little isolated. And sometimes, especially if we're coming from a service background like the universities or workforce setting, we feel like, can I really charge and still be helping people? You know, I want to help people. I don't want to charge them too much to this point where I'm not helping them. And so there are a lot of these physical, logistical barriers and emotional barriers to us setting our pricing in a way that actually encourages good services and good customer behavior. So we're going to talk about that today. How can we still be helping while we set prices that actually encourage these good behaviors? And we are going to start by knowing what you want to learn. So you'll have to share this as they share in the chat, Marie, but I want to know what's your top challenge and try to pick one. Do you feel like you're not charging enough? Do you feel like you don't know how to quote that price? You're uncomfortable quoting the price? Do you not even know where to start in deciding what to charge? Maybe you're trying to overcome objections all the time. This is one of the things that people said in our Facebook group, you know, the price resistance, or people saying, oh, I've got sticker shock. Or is there something else? What is it that you find is your biggest challenge? And if for some reason we don't cover that today, or you still have questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me at marie@careerthoughtleaders.com. I'm happy to send you an answer via email or set up a time to chat one-on-one if that would be helpful. And of course, it's always great to know what you're struggling with so that I can provide answers and information to all of our colleagues who are struggling with the same things. So Marie, what do we have coming in? What types of things are people struggling with?
So far, we have quite a few people saying being comfortable quoting the price, knowing where to start and what to charge. And then we have a few people that have said overcoming with objections. Okay,
so I'll just give you this tip right here. So if you have to get off, you get this one awesome tip. I had a customer, which for me is all of you, sometimes confusing. So I had a colleague who was struggling with her pricing. And we talked about how she could get over this price objection. And she said, part of it is they call me, but they don't have any idea what to expect. And there's some debate on whether you should put your prices on your website or not. And in a deeper class she had done with us, we talked about those pros and cons. And I said, well, what would it be like if you put your prices on your website? Because that kind of gives you permission to charge people what you're going to charge them. Because if you look at the website, they already know that that's what you're going to charge. And she did that and found that it was much easier for her then to quote the price. The downfalls of that is that it doesn't give you a chance to build value, which we'll talk about later. And so if you haven't built value, people can select out quickly from that price just because of the price, and they don't really understand what they'll get from that. But if you find that you're having trouble quoting a price and you're constantly undercutting yourself and then kind of kicking yourself for it, that might be something you try, to put a price or a price range on your website so people don't have that sticker shock when they call you, and see how it goes. As with many things in life and in business, there's an experiment, and I'm gonna give you some best practices and things to try as you go, and then you can tell me what kind of results you get. So let's keep moving here, remembering those things. Today we're going to talk about your business foundation, because all of your pricing and your marketing is really based on understanding your business. We're going to go through that quickly, but you need to know it before you think about setting your prices. I'm going to give you some pricing data, and hopefully that can help you as you're quoting and as you're talking about pricing to understand where you might fit in this big thing that we call a marketplace. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the psychology of pricing as well as the psychology of selling and a few things you can do differently to help get where you want to be with your pricing. So let's talk about your business. And we start with the personal brand. And sometimes people think of personal brand as pushing and selling and, selling yourself. But when we talk about personal branding, it's really that foundation of who are you? What is it that you authentically do? And if you're in private practice, you get to start there, even though, good business would say start with the market need. You're in business. So you get to decide what is it that you want to do. Then how do you do that differently than everyone else? Because that's part of your market value. And then, of course, who are your customers and what matters to them about what you do and how you do it differently. One of the structures that you can think about is what do you do? So what services do you want to offer? What is it that you really love to do? Is it job search? Is it leadership coaching? Is it career? You get to decide what you do. And the more clarity you have around that, the easier all of these pieces will become. Then how do you do it? Do you do one-on-one coaching? Do you do classes? Do you do a mix of those two? What does it feel like to work with you? How is that different than everyone else, of course? And then who do you work with? Who are those customers? What's important about them? What connects you to them? Who do you really love working with? And why? And then that kind of bigger why. Why do you do what you do? And if you've read Simon Sinek's Start With Why, or maybe just the title, and you think you have to start with why, that can be a big question. The idea of that isn't that you start with why in figuring out what you do, it's that you start with why in your marketing. So your marketing might be a backwards funnel to what you see here, where you're telling the story of why you do what you do, and then working people through to how you do what you do and what. But as you're digging down and deciding what you want to do, I'd recommend starting at what, then think about how you do it differently, who you offer it to, or who connects with how you do it, and then why. What is it that draws you to it? Why do you do what you do? Because that's really unique. All of us do it for a different reason, and that's our unique story that you'll use in your marketing. So then we get to the customer side of it. So that authenticity piece is our side. Why do we do what we do? And then differentiation and relevance. So differentiation is what stands out about you. Relevance is why your audience cares. It's a connection that sometimes people miss. They think about how they're different than other coaches or resume writers. They don't necessarily connect it to the value of why the audience cares about that difference. So that's part of your marketing strategy, to just go through and really think about that. I'm giving you some questions here to describe your target audience and really think about that. The clearer you are about who you serve, the easier it will be to do the pricing research that we're going to talk about here in a minute, and to market your prices or to market your services and connect what you do to the value it offers for them. This doesn't mean that you can't serve other people. So sometimes it can get a little scary when we start thinking about really narrowing down our audience. And it's okay if it takes you a while to get here, but you want to keep thinking, who is my audience? What defines them? And I don't know about you, but for me, the idea of picking at people's pain points is, it's not something I want to do. And it's a pretty common marketing and sales idea. So I go and meet with my sales coach and he say, what's their pain points? And I said, I don't want to do that. He said, okay, well then you can speak to the future wins, right? Their desires. And I tend to like to market that way better. I'll still do some pain points every once in a while, but I like to speak more to what you'll get in the future if we work together. How will life be different for you tomorrow when we work together? And if I can't tell that story, I'm gonna have a hard time marketing my services and commanding the value I want to command with my prices. This is just a fun little picture, visual, to think about how are you the same as other people who do what you do, and how are you different? How is the experience of doing business with you different? How are clients going to find you differently? What are they going to connect with you that is different? And in our marketing, this is something we need to think about, because differentiation and then connecting the value to it is how we're going to command the prices that we want to command. No, we're colleagues, right? We're not competitors. We all do things different. And that's why people have different options when they work with us. And you want to be able to think about that. So when I first launched my practice, I was in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I pretty much worked in Fort Collins, Colorado. I spoke to the local job group. It's hard to believe because it existed, but I just wasn't using it to get worldwide or nationwide and use social media and those types of things. That just wasn't where I was started. And so my business was fairly local. And I had to know my competitors who were local and be able to describe how I was different from them. Some of it was pretty obvious in how we showed up. You show up differently than other people. And for a while, I thought I needed to show up the same to be competitive. And I realized that if I showed up like me, not the same as my other competition in town, it actually made it easier to be different and to connect my difference to value. And then also how I was doing what I was doing was different and why. And if I could connect to those things, then I wasn't talking about how I was different than X, Y, or Z person. It was really just how I'm unique. And taking away that comparison piece of it made it sound a lot less defensive and made it a lot more successful in my conversations. So as you get to define these things, it actually becomes easier for you to talk about how you're different without the kind of comparison, competitive, defensive. It's just really owning who you are and being able to connect that to how it adds value to your customers. And it doesn't really have to be that you're better than anyone else. It's just this is how your unique piece adds value to them. So where do you want to fit? And these are just some basic pricing strategies. You can Google these, you can look up different ones. I chose these ones because these are the ones I see people using in the career services place. Discount and economy. I'm actually connected to a coach that calls himself the affordable career coach. What does affordable mean, right? That means something different to everyone. It's a relative term. I would steer you away from using terms like that unless you want to find some way to back it up. What this usually means is that we might close more sales. And in fact, you can be in this model if you have a high volume, lower price model. You can do that. How are you going to structure your business? How are you going to make that happen? It can increase your comfort in quoting the prices. And this is where a lot of people start in the business. It's definitely where I started in the business, was quoting a little bit lower price to get my feet wet, get some experience, understand what I was doing. However, long term, it can lead to burnout and maybe even frustration because you feel like people are taking advantage of you. And I started to get to that point where I was spending so much time or having to turn away other business. And I started to feel like, I'm getting taken advantage of here. Can't serve anyone when that's how you're feeling inside. People can have a lower perceived value of what you do. So because your price is lower may mean that you have more demanding clients because they don't understand the value that you offer, and they might treat you like a secretary, not coming from experience at all. Or they don't buy your services because you're so underpriced from everyone else. I just talked to someone who's doing executive resumes on the West Coast in the Bay Area for $400 a resume. I know her competitors are charging $1,000 to $1,500. When they call her and that she quotes $400 and her competitor quotes $1,000, they're not necessarily going to think, oh, wow, she's really cheap. They're going to think maybe she doesn't know what she's doing. There's that point somewhere that if we're not charging enough, we actually lose our perceived value and might lose sales because of it. People don't understand the wide breadth, and so they think that we just don't know what we're doing. Cost plus is here in the middle, and this is a slippery slope because we can take our hourly rate, whatever we want to make hourly, and add some profit on top and say, this is what I'm going to charge. So you might have decided that you can do 5 resumes a week, or you can have 10 coaching appointments a week, and you want to make $60,000. So you go through and you figure out that I need to charge $300 a coaching session to be able to make $60,000 and only work X amount per week. What that does, though, is that it doesn't take anything else into account, your market, what you want to offer, how you want to work. And it's fuzzy. And I see a lot of people kind of recommending that this is how you choose what you charge, but it's pricing in a vacuum. It doesn't take into account your competition, your market, who you want to work with, any of that. So be careful of that model. That model can work really well when you're subcontracting and someone else is bringing in the business and you want to make sure that you're covering your costs. So it can work. You just want to be careful about what that means. The other thing is you don't want to sell your prices based on, I'm going to spend this many hours for you, because that might not always work. And then you might have to shift your quote. And I know some people do this, and I wouldn't really recommend it. That if you say, oh, I'm going to spend 8 hours on your resume or whatever it is, and then they need more hours, do you have to go back to them and say, well, I need more hours, so I'm going to have to charge you more? This type of pricing can just get wiggly on you. So be careful about what you do and how you're going to manage that. It can work for consulting projects, can work for subcontracting. I wouldn't recommend it for setting pricing for coaching or for your resume services. Premium or luxury. So this is where you see a lot of people in our industry wanting to go, because of course it means that we can charge more, not have to be so crazy on our schedules, and perhaps work with a different level of person. That doesn't mean everybody needs to be here. Cliff Icahn is in the Bay Area. This is one of the things he talks about. Like, not everybody needs to be an executive resume writer. Everybody needs help, right? Everybody needs coaching. However, how you want to position yourself in each market can still be as a premium or luxury brand. So you could serve the blue collar brand and still not necessarily brand yourself as affordable. You could still be a luxury person in that market. You just aren't going to charge the same as someone who focuses on executives. So the type of pricing doesn't necessarily have to do with the dollar amount, because they're always connected. Who do you want to serve, and what does that market look like? And how can you at least in some way make sure that your pricing is connected to what's going on in the market? Some people will say, oh, when you work with executives and you charge a lot of money, they're going to be more demanding. I really haven't found that to be true. The only time I've found a really demanding client where I charge them a lot is when I charged them more than they were really comfortable, and they didn't get the value before we got together. Most of the time you can feel that, and you can say, okay, this isn't a good fit. I'll refer you to someone else. So when you feel that pressure, and if you're pressuring someone into the sale, it's usually not going to be a good fit long term. Great customers are the ones where you go through and you build the value first, which we'll talk about. And then when you quote the price, they don't even flinch. They say, just sign me up. The part of getting there is being able to sell that value before you ever even get to talking about price. So big point here in red, your pricing has to align with your operations and your audience. So you need to know, how much will I make annually if I charge this much, and have it be in the realm of reality. And you also need to think about who's my audience, and not necessarily what do I think they're willing to pay, but what is going on in that market. The challenge for most of us is that strong brands attract, but they also repel. So when we really focus in and we say, I'm going to do blue collar, or I'm going to do executives, or I'm going to work with tech, there's other people that's not them. And so we have to be prepared for that in some ways. And we have to realize that we're not really giving up anything, because by having that strong brand, we're going to attract so many more people. And when we attract, the pricing tends to not matter as much. It's when we're pushing and trying to get people that the pricing tends to matter a little bit more. So this is my own little quote here. Dream it and you can be it is not a pricing strategy. I love those motivational things to a point, but when they tell you that you can make $200,000, you just have to believe it. There's a little bit more going on there. We have to understand, how does that pricing fit with our operations, and how does that pricing fit with our market? Really break it down and understand, to make $100,000, how much of X would you have to do every week? Or what level would your clients have to be willing to pay? And how are you going to build a brand that commands that value? You can do it. You just have to align your brand with the customers, with the price you want to command. Any questions here before we keep going?
Yes, there are some questions. Let me read them to you. This person writes, they need help to convince people they are worth the money. They would probably spend money on their kids, but feel guilty spending on themselves.
Yeah, we're going to show you a few things that will help with that. I'm going to make a note just so I don't forget. What else do we have there?
This person writes, I'd like to know what to charge for non-executives.
Excellent. We'll talk about that.
The next person writes, how to bundle services and know what to charge and how many sessions is enough.
Okay.
Would you like a few more?
We'll stop again here in just a little bit.
Sounds good.
So here's what I'm going to recommend for your pricing strategy. First, that you do some kind of market analysis. And this goes back to the very beginning of knowing what you want to do and your audience, because I don't want you going out and searching resume writing and trying to find what everybody else in the world charges. I want you searching in your niche. So there are people that focus in blue collar resumes. You could search blue collar resumes, look at their websites, see what they're charging, see how you want to do what's different. Do you want to price yourself to be a little bit more luxury in that market? Do you want to price yourself to be more affordable in that market? We'll go through some pricing data in general, but for you to do it for your market is going to be really helpful. Is it geographic? Is it based on industry? Is it based on level? Figure out what you want to do and do some research. You can do the same thing in coaching. What are people charging? If you can find it, go to some groups, do some networking, and do some discovery. What are people charging in your specific market? Then, of course, looking at your operations. What is your goal for profit? How many hours of work are you able to do? How many resumes a week? How many coaching sessions per week? And then build that pricing structure. So let's get into the data. Oop, too far. So this is data from a few different sources. One of them being the International Coach Federation puts out some data, and well as some of the private organizations like the World of Business and Executive Coaches. So there's some data out there in general. If you want the links for these, I can share it with you. But the range is huge, right? 100 to 350 per hour for coaching. I would say if you are charging less than 100 an hour for coaching, get it up there to $100 an hour. Even when you're talking about counseling and comparing it to counseling, most counselors charge 75 to 100 an hour, and coaching is just a little bit different market. 100 to 200 was the most frequent. That's still a huge range. 150 seems to be kind of like the average. 150 for a coach that has at least some experience. And then you got monthly packages that people are selling monthly packages up to $5,000. You just have to know what you want to do. And we'll talk a little bit about how many sessions here in a minute. Resume writing, the hourly rate, and this is from the Resume Writers Digest that Bridget White Brooks runs, 50 to 300 per hour, with 150 per hour being the most commonly stated, and 600 per resume and cover letter on average. So packages, people are charging, $1,500 plus for a cover letter, resume, and LinkedIn profile. And we'll break that down here in just a minute. So that average, $600. So if I have someone that calls me and I quote them, I don't know, let's say $950 for a resume, and they'll say, maybe they say, oh, that's a little expensive. Well, I'll say, well, I'm in the 75th percentile or so in the industry, and based on what I do and how few clients I can work with every year, that's where I set my prices. So having this general range helps because I'm average, or I'm a little under the average, and then you've got to figure out how you want to spend that. So if you're average or under average, how do you want to spend the value of that, right? Because again, being cheaper is not necessarily communicating value. How do you want to spin that? That's a value to the person that you're talking to. Or of course, if you're more than average, how are you going to talk about that as being the value, connected to that value? Because it's not just about the price, it's about the value. So let's talk a little bit about packaging. So there's pros and cons to packaging. I talk to coaches that like to do it hourly. I talk to coaches that will only do packages. Pros of packaging is that it's easier to track. So this is one of the reasons I got into packaging, was because I could not have to charge them every time. I didn't have a system that did it automatically when I first started, and I'd have to keep asking them to pay. Well, when you don't like to ask for money in the first place, and then you have to ask for it every time, not going to work. So for me, I said, okay, I'm going to do a package, and they are going to pay all up front. And I would encourage you to do that. Get payment all up front. For a while, I was doing half up front and half in the middle. And then again, I'd have to ask them, or maybe we'd be in that kind of tough spot where they're doing research and they're trying to figure it out. And so I felt uncomfortable asking, because we're in that tough spot, right? And it's one of the reasons I like to do packages with coaching, is because there is usually a tough spot where they have to get real and realize that if they don't take action, nothing is going to happen. And if they haven't already paid, they might decide not to come to that next coaching session and really not get the value out of it. So I do a package. Typically, I do 4 or 5 coaching sessions, 4 or 5 hours, and have it set up that way. Some people like to do a longer first session. That's great. You just want to build your package and understand what you're offering, not just the hours of coaching, but also all the other things you might offer, resources, handouts, checklists, whatever it might be. Make sure you're giving yourself credit for all that value, both in your pricing and in the way that you communicate it to others. So you might end up with more revenue when you do packaging. Cons, of course, it's harder to quote because you're quoting a bigger number. It might feel like it's not the right size to someone. So I'd have people come to me and they'd say, oh, I went and talked to this person and they showed me their package and I don't need that whole package. Well, then I knew right away that that wasn't how I was going to deliver it. So I very rarely send people the package handout that I'm going to show you before we have our prospect conversation. I might send them some of it, but usually we have the conversation and then I edit the package to fit their needs, which most of the time they're pretty similar, but I can edit it to fit their needs, and then they feel like they're getting it customized to them. So there's that flexibility, and it's targeted to them. It's not just, this is what I do. This is the process I put everybody through, which can feel off-putting to some people. So here's a couple of sample plans. And again, I usually send these as a proposal after I talk to the prospect. Occasionally I'll send it to people ahead of time if they're really struggling with understanding what coaching is or what is it going to look like, and they're hesitant to schedule a prospect call because of that. I'll send this to them ahead of time and say, we'll customize it to meet your needs. This is just an example of what we could do together. And I've got a dozen of these running around in my computer, some that are more focused on branding, some that are more focused on job search, some that are more focused on career change, so that I can send different ones to different people with not having to do a whole lot of editing. And you'll see this shortest one here is 4 sessions. And that was for someone who just wanted to get career focused, not necessarily diving deep into assessments, but wanting to do some work on their career focus. And then the one on the left is actually 2 pages. It goes all through the focus, the communication, and then the leadership side of it. And that's something I might send to someone who is in an organization and wanting to build their brand as a leader. So this helps give it structure, and typically put some kind of homework and deliverables in there so that they understand up front that that's going to be expected. And I can put the price at the end based on our conversation. And a lot of times I never quote price on the phone. So they'll say, oh, this sounds great. I'll say, oh, great. I'll send you a proposal with the outline of what we're going to do, and the pricing will be right on there. What that does is it takes it out of a commodity exchange. It's not you're buying this pizza for $12.99. It's that this is an engagement, and I'm going to send you a proposal just like any business would send you a proposal with a price. So encourage yourself to think about it that way. Talk to your client, say, this is great. I'm going to put together a proposal for you and send it to you. The pricing will be right on there. Then we don't have to get into price, and they've built the value. They look through the proposal before they see the investment, and they know right away the value that you're bringing. A lot of times what happens to us when we get resistance in price, and I've got a video on this I can share with you, or you can find it on the Career Thought Leaders YouTube channel. A lot of times when we get price resistance, it's because we're getting to price too fast, and we're not really asking what the person needs, making sure that we understand what value they need before we start talking about process. We're not selling process. We're selling the value that they're going to get. And that really has to connect with what value they're looking for, or we miss the boat. So it's less about us and more about them, which is excellent for us, right? As coaches, as counselors, we love it to be about them. So make your sales process that way too. Don't make your sales process about you, make it about them. So here's a screen capture from website, Knock 'em Dead, What Should Professional Resume Writing Services Cost? It's there at the bottom of the slide. He lists on there what he thinks, Martin Yates, what he thinks these services should cost. And he's pretty close. He's pretty spot on in terms of what I hear and the averages that I hear people charging. So this is how I structured my packages from the very beginning, was that if you were entry level, I charged you this much. If you were mid-level, I charged you that much. And if you're executive, I charged you this much. That does not have to do necessarily with the hours that I'm going to spend, but it has to do with the value that these things are bringing to their career. Sounds a little weird because you think, well, yeah, you're going to spend more time on each of those. Yes, but that's not how I'm selling it. An executive expects to pay more than a student, and they almost kind of like this breakout, but they don't necessarily have to see it. You could put these ranges on your website, or you can just quote when the person comes to you, which is what I've done most of the time. When you put these ranges on your website, it really helps. So you could say entry-level resumes starting at $350 or $400, mid-level resumes starting at $600, executive resumes starting at $1,100. Gives you some flexibility, and yet it puts it out on your site so that you don't have to have as much price resistance, maybe, if that's something you find yourself struggling with. You'll get less prospects, perhaps, but they'll already know what you want to charge. So if you have a lot of prospects and you'd be okay losing a few, it might be something you try. If you don't have very many prospects, I wouldn't recommend putting your prices out there on your website just yet. So here's our second pitfall hazard. I think this was my husband who said this to me one day, that what's in my prospects' pockets is none of my business. So I'm not changing my pricing based on what I think people can pay. I have a pricing strategy that I've set up based on my knowledge of the audience, but I'm not thinking, oh, a student can't pay as much, so I'm going to charge less. When I start thinking that way, I'm in trouble, because then people are going to say, oh, I can't afford that. And then you're going to find out that they just spent $750 on music or a concert, and it had nothing to do with what they could afford. It had to do with what they value. You have to hold your value. Don't let them decide what your value is. It'll almost always disappoint you. So you decide, what is your pricing strategy? Do your research, be comfortable with it, and then stick with it. Do not offer discounts. Don't offer discounts. I will offer things to free for people who don't ask, but I know are struggling. They'll say, oh, I'm going to talk to my mom and see if she can help me, or I'm going to talk to, and I'll say, you know what? I do a free one every quarter, and I'd love for that to be you. Don't let people convince you that they can't afford it and discount yourself because of that. Have your pricing strategy, stick to it so that you can do what you want to do with your value and be able to do those freebies when they're really necessary, instead of constantly kind of chipping away at yourself by devaluing yourself and cutting your prices. It's not helping anyone. So let's move into the psychology of pricing and selling. So this is interesting. I'm going to go through these kind of fast because it's just some little fun facts. But you may have seen that a lot of people offer 3 packages on their site, and there's some psychology behind that. So this is a YouTube video. Got the link here on the bottom of your screen, or if you don't have time to capture it, feel free to email me. I'll send it to you. And this gentleman was looking at the Economist website and saw that they had 3 subscription options, but 2 of them are the exact same. So you have print subscription for $125 or print and web for $125. And so he called them, he asked them why they did that. He said no one really answered him. And then a few weeks later, he went back and they changed it. Now it was only 2. And he's a professor, so he did some research with one of his classes and did these pricing strategies, which one works best. And what he found was that when people offered 3 options, one that's kind of nonsense, right? This one that why would you spend $125 for print when you could get print and web for $125? That the higher priced one sold better. When you took it down to 2 options, oh man, I took away the best part. So when you took it down to 2 options, he had little arrows over here to the side that I cut out. The cheaper one sells more when you take it down to 2 options, and it flips. So it was almost an exact flip of this 16 to 84, where then 84% bought the cheaper one and only 16% bought the most expensive one. I'm sorry, I cut out the right side of that image. So offering 3 works. People are most likely to pick the center choice. So make sure you're okay with that center choice. That should be kind of your bread and butter, the one that's a good income, the things you love to do, everything, it should be the good one. You don't want to say, well, here's just the resume, and here's the resume and cover letter, and then here's the resume, cover letter, and branding. If you really love to do the branding or coaching or whatever you want to call it, I call it branding because people are more likely to buy that than coaching, then that should be in the center package. So the first package is resume and cover letter. The second one is, resume, cover letter, and branding, because we have to get that, coaching to really understand who you are before we can do the resume. And then the last piece, the big package, also includes your LinkedIn profile or something, because I want what I love to do to be in that middle option. I don't want nobody to be choosing the one that includes some coaching. And that's a strategy if you're a resume writing, but you want to add some more coaching. Build it into your process. Make it one of those things so that you can start to get some success, start to get some stories, start to be able to explain the value, and then you'll be able to sell more coaching. So build those packages into 3s, but make sure that middle one has what you think people really need. And then the bigger one is the bonuses, right? It's the extras. So for you and your clients, that middle one needs to contain what they need. All right. So other just a few fun things. We like to price with the 99 cent for things that are kind of cheap, like ebook or a course. You want to be careful of doing that like with a package, because packages and value tend to come in zeros. So try putting your package, even if you're doing a coaching package for a month, give it zeros and see how that works. There's some value in that. It has some weight that it carries with it. And then if you are using prices with thousands, the research shows that $14.99 without any decimals or commas sells better than 1,499. So that's some external stuff. Let's go in, because in is where most of the problems happen. When you're struggling with selling, when you're struggling with closing, when you're struggling with pricing, most of the time it's our own mindset. That maybe we don't believe we should charge that much. Maybe we don't believe we can. Maybe we don't believe we're worth it. There's some internal stuff going on there. So let's talk about that. The first is that when we think about cost, this is how much something costs. It's kind of a negative word, 4-letter word, imagine that. Think about it instead as an investment. And you see a lot of articles about this. You invest in yourself, you invest in your career. Go through your marketing materials and take out the word cost. Put in the word investment. Think about what you say when you're talking to prospects. Remove the word cost from your vocabulary. It will also help your mental, and it will help their mental processing if you're calling it an investment. This is also on Martin Yates' site, and he talks about how we can help the individual, the prospect, understand the value of what we do. He's got the numbers there. You can break them down, make them apply to your situations. But if someone's earning $40,000 a year, you can see that's $33.33 a month, $769 a week, $150 a day. So if they paid for one coaching package with you, and let's say that coaching package is $750, they only have to get to work 1 week faster for that investment to pay itself back. You can do that. Your value does that. You probably have stories you can tell about that. Coaching in general moves people to their goal 33% faster. So we know that coaching works. Add it, connect it to real numbers for them. And you could put this up on your website. You can give Martin credit if you feel like it, but it's quite a few places out there. Tell people this is what it means. This is the value. If you got to work 1 week faster, it would pay for itself. If you're charging for a resume, if you're charging for any of those things, what type of salary are your clients typically making, and how much faster do they have to get back to work for their investment to pay off for itself? They know, especially if they're in business, that return on investment, so you can build some business credibility with them by sharing it that way and giving them some data to back it up. This is the hardest thing about sales, is that it's really hard to close a sale when you need a sale, because then the sale becomes all about you. We need to be in a place where the sale is about our client, and is what I do a good fit for them? And if not, I say no. Let me refer you to somebody else. When you're in that place where you feel like you need to close a sale, it's a hard place to be, because they can feel that. When we come into it where we know, hey, I'm going to be okay if this doesn't work out. It's kind of like dating, right? I'm going to be okay if this doesn't work out. It makes it an easier conversation. And then the sales conversation can really be about the client. What do they need? What are they looking for? What would make next month great for them? What would success look like? We can ask those great questions, great coaching questions that uncover their desires, their needs, their pains. And then we can talk about our process specifically as it relates to that. So I'll ask people, what are you looking for in your resume? What don't you like about it? And they'll say, I just feel like it doesn't tell my story. Bam. I let them talk. I ask more questions. And then I come back around and I say, well, here's what we would do. We'd have an hour-and-a-half consultation so that I can really hear your story and make sure we get your story in your words into document. That's what I do. It's what I love to do. And I'm connecting it to their pain. Same thing with coaching. Why do they need to go through coaching? Oh, they want to speed their job search. How can you connect what they're looking for to what you do? That's what builds the value, so that they're not worried about price. When we do it that way, sure, you're still going to get some price resistance, but it's going to be much, much lower. When people get on the phone and they ask me, what do you charge? I'll say, well, it depends on what we're going to do together. Can I ask you a few questions before we get started? Sure. And if they're really pushing on price, they're not a good fit. Because if they're shopping price, they don't want someone who's in the 75th percentile. And so I'll tell them right away, well, I typically work with executives or people who are looking to do a deeper dive. I'd be happy to connect you with some of my colleagues. What budget are you looking for? Because I don't want to connect them with a colleague who's also going to be over their budget. And a lot of times their budget is way out of line. They'll say, I want to pay, $50 for a resume. And I'll say, resume writers typically charge $200 to $750 for a resume. For someone that's really going to pay attention to you, not be outsourcing it overseas, you're looking at that range. Would that be something you'd be interested in? Around, $200, $300. Yes or no? If no, then go to your workforce center, right? Here's your local free resources. So be okay staying where you are, serving the clients you want to serve, charging the prices you want to charge. Know that they're founded in some kind of research, some kind of comparison and understanding of the market, but then don't feel like you have to discount yourself. those new people who are just starting that charge $250, $300 a resume, they love those referrals. It helps them get started. And my client gets good service. I only send them to people that I've heard back, offer good service. And so then they get helped by that. And I don't have to feel like I'm devaluing myself or spending more time. And I'm still helping people. In fact, now I'm helping two people, helping the client and I'm helping this new professional that's just getting started. Your value isn't in the hours you spend. So don't say, I'm going to work 8 hours on your resume and that's why it's this much. Well, what if you only end up spending 7? Your value is in what you do. It's in all of the years of expertise that you bring to what you do. They're not paying for those 6-7 hours of coaching. They're paying for all the experience, all the training, all of that goes into it. And when we start to price ourselves based on hours or sell it that way or feel like we're struggling because of that, we're really devaluing ourselves. And when we aren't selling our full process every time, we have to tell people everything that we do, it's a lot less talking for us. And it actually sells your credibility and value better when you ask questions and get to people to realize their own needs rather than explaining your whole process. All right, so let's see. So someone asked how many sessions. I think we covered that. How do you get that you're worth the money? If they're asking you that, you may not have built value up front, or they just might not be the right client for you. I'm not sure that you can convince someone you're worth the money. So try flipping your sales process next time and see if that helps you not get that question. Ask, figure out what they're looking for, and then speak directly to their pains with your specific services. Connect the dots for them and see if you don't get that question. What other questions do we have, Marie?
We have some that are comments and some that are questions. I'll start with a comment. This person says, we have to find a balance between taking care of ourselves and our families and following Adam Grant's lead of being a giver. I'm constantly navigating that balance.
Right. And just to think about that, just because you're charging less doesn't necessarily mean you're giving. So you can give in different ways. Like I said, I would give one free a quarter rather than discounting my prices because someone said they needed it discounted. A lot of times that comes back and bites you because they say they need it discounted. And then you find out that they make $250,000 a year or something. You just can't. If you get in the habit of discounting based on people asking, that's not necessarily giving.
This person says they're curious if they can do a survey of attendees for what they charge for executive, professional, and new grads.
Sure, we could do a survey. The Resume Writer's Digest information that I shared at the beginning kind of averages all of it together, doesn't do the specific levels. So yeah, we could do a survey. The hard thing with surveys is that they're self-report. So yeah.
This person says, is it possible to get a larger view of the speaker? Marie Zimenoff, if you're okay with that, I can certainly do that. Hold on.
Sure.
There she is. Yay. All right. There's some more questions and comments if you're
yeah, we've got a few minutes.
More. Great. Let me scroll a little bit here. This person says, this is new to me. What are the price ranges per hour and package rates? Could you describe examples of typical packages of career development services and price ranges? They may have asked that question before your slides.
Yeah. Well, if you still have questions on that, let me know. I think the hard part is there's no typical. So you get to decide, are you going to do, and I would break mine out into phases, if you will. So if someone needed help figuring out what they want to be when they grow up, and then they also needed help with their resume, and then they needed help with their job search, I would offer it in 3 different phases. I'd tell them up front what those 3 different phases were, but I'd only get payment for one phase at a time unless they really wanted to get a discount and bundle it all together. I did that because I saw someone else I was working with sorry, that's me. Something on my screen is going crazy. So I saw that they would pay for it and then they'd go away, and then they'd come back like a year later and say, oh, I still have this credit with you. I didn't want to be serving someone a year after they paid. So I'd break it up into smaller chunks so that they could be more apt to buy. And I wouldn't have this like lording over me that someone paid me all this money and didn't keep coming, right? Didn't finish. So you can do phases for different things. You have to decide, what part do you really want to offer? Do you want to do focus? Do you want to do branding? Do you want to do job search? And then structure it that way. Some people like to focus in one area. Some people like to do it all. That's the creative part of owning a business. And then you kind of look at the hourly. So I would look at my 4-session career focus and say, okay, I'm charging $150 an hour. So that's $600 plus the assessments, plus the outside time doing some research for them. And I'd come up with a package price of maybe $750. Not just basing it on hours, right? Because there's more that goes into that. And I want to have some flexibility. I don't want to be thinking, oh, this person keeps emailing me and I'm feeling drained by that. And that's up to us, right? We get to set those boundaries. We get to set the pricing. And I'd set my pricing just a little bit wider so that I could be helpful and not feel like they were taking advantage of me.
We have a couple comments in the chat. Someone says, thank you. Someone says, this is helpful. The next person says, I know my pricing is too low, but I'm concerned that I might make too big a jump and a referral might be turned off because he or she heard what my prior pricing was.
Yeah, so little increments. It depends on what your thing there is. So if you're charging $400 and your competitors are charging $700, you might go up $100 next year. And then when that referral comes in, you could say, here's my price, and wait to get pushback. Don't feel like they might not know. Your person might not have shared with them what that was. So state your price. And then if they come and they say, oh, well, so-and-so said that it was this price, you say, oh, well, I'm happy to give you, a $50 discount towards your next service, or a $50 discount because you were a referral. You can decide what you want to say, but don't automatically assume that they're not going to be okay with it. Most people increase their prices year over year, and they're going to expect it in some ways. And again, they might not have shared what that was. You can decide how you want to handle it. Oh, I increased my prices from last year. I do that every year. You can have a few talking points that decide it in terms of what you want to say.
This next person asks, can you talk about charging for career workshops or charging for groups?
Yeah, so charging for career workshops or groups depends on if it's for an organization or if you're having those individuals pay. So if each individual is paying, you want to look at the group and making sure that it is cheaper than you charge individually, because of course that's a funnel filler. So if I charge $100 an hour, it might be kind of $50 an hour to join the group, and I could put that together and see what it looks like. I don't want to make it too cheap, because I would, if I was going to do a group, build in some individual time. So they're in the group and they get 2 individual coaching hours. Something, because most of the time people have questions outside of group. And if I don't build in some one-on-one time, then I'm going to have to upsell that. And I'd rather just have it in the package. So they get the group and 2 individual hours of time. And I'm looking at over, the span of it, I'm charging an average amount. And you always want to look at your price and say, okay, if it's a 7-week group and I'm charging, $600, does that feel like it's different enough from what I would do one-on-one? Because most of the time people are going to shop both options, and you want to have some differentiation in your pricing. And maybe a third option. So they could do group, they could do one-on-one. What's the third option so that they have choices? If you are selling groups, I would recommend that you sell the options. So I would get a lot of clients referred from one of my competitors because they'd go to her and she'd sell them the group, and they didn't want to be in a group. And for some reason they weren't listening, or she didn't tell them that there was the one-on-one option. And people like options. So if you're doing a group, even though you might be trying to fill the group, make sure that you offer people, the group one-on-one. Maybe you've got an online class as a third option so that they feel like they've got choices.
This person says, great info about resumes and pricing. That was a problem for me. This person says, great information. This next person says, if we have a conversation with a client first, then send them the proposal, it seems that you have more license to variation in pricing, like a building contractor would. Do you agree or disagree?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Because my pricing isn't just based on their level. If I'm sending them a package, I'm thinking, how many sessions do they need? What do they want to do? Maybe we talked about it in our prospect conversation that they want to do the strengths finder or they want to do something, then I can add that in. And it's kind of like being any other service provider. When you work with a web designer, they send you a proposal, right, based on your needs. So it takes us out of that commodity zone and takes you into that trusted advisor. That's what we want to be. We want to be a trusted advisor. And a trusted advisor sends you a proposal based on what you think they need, not, a listing of a service. And you can do both. You can, sell some ways as a trusted advisor and then still have a resume price listing on your website for people that just want a resume. You don't have to choose one or the other necessarily, although eventually you may switch all the way over to that trusted advisor because it's where the more connection, more engagement, more value comes for you and for the person if they're in a longer engagement with you.
This person says, you mentioned that you're in the 75th percentile. How does a career coach or resume writer know if they're in the 75th percentile or not?
Well, so that data that I showed you said 600 per resume was average. So that's 50%. And I'm going to say, 1,500 or something like that is what I'm considering 100th percentile, even though people charge more than that. So if I'm charging them 1,000, it's kind of 75th percentile. Doesn't need to be exact science, but it gives people, especially managers and financial people, it gives them some context because they'll know, oh, that means that you're above average, but you're not the most expensive. You can sell value at any range. You can say, I'm average price-wise, and I do that because X, Y, or Z. I'm 100 percentile. I charge more than any other resume writer, and I do that because, and if you own it, you'll sell it. There's lots of people that do. It's all about connecting it to the value that it offers your specific audience. If they want the best of the best, they're probably willing to pay for the best of the best. Of course, then you have to deliver the best of the best.
This person says, this has been extremely helpful. Feel much more confident about pricing.
Excellent.
That's nice. This person says, I like this idea of packaging because I find that clients tend to want to do 3 or 4 sessions, and sometimes I feel like it won't be helpful.
Yeah, and you've got the experience, so you decide how many sessions you want to do. I chose 4 because I didn't want to do too many, because then people stopped showing up. I didn't want to do too little because I wanted them to get the connection, get the value. So you get to choose based on your experience. There are people that do 3-month engagements, and that's all they'll do. There are people that do session by session, which wouldn't be my favorite because I don't like to ask for the money every time. So it's up to you.
This person says, one of my packages is a assessment package, assessment, administration, and interpretation. I'm concerned that I'm undercharging. What is a typical assessment, interpretation, assessment package?
So a lot of that depends on the cost of the assessment that you're using and what is it helping, what's the value, and how do you connect those dots. So with the 360 reach, we have people do just an interpretation of that. It's 2 sessions because I recommend you always do a coaching session before they get the results, help them get their foundation, their grounding before you bring in the assessment results. So we do 2 sessions plus the assessment. And I think people are charging somewhere around $450 for that. So it depends on the audience. So for that audience, usually it's kind of the mid-level leaders in a company that are looking for that. If you're working with job seekers, it might be a little bit lower. If you're working with, trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, it might be a little bit lower unless you're doing multiple assessments and multiple sessions. So it's going to depend on how many sessions it takes and how expensive is that assessment that you're doing.
This person says, I really needed this information. I'm so glad that you shared this information with us.
Yay.
Great. This person writes, I suggest having a circle of close colleagues. with you who you can bounce ideas and pricing off of. Just had a huge awakening by doing just that.
Right. Yeah. Find those colleagues, find them in your location, find them in your industry. That's what these networking groups are all about, like NCDA and career thought leaders and whatever it is that you're a part of. Find those groups that are willing to share. And if people feel like, oh, I'm not going to share my pricing with you, you might look for a different group.
This one says, I was going to charge X amount for participation for an event. My colleague told me to double it. I was scared, but my higher price was accepted. Nice.
It's always nice to have that external feedback. The first corporate training I did, I was putting down my proposal, put down a number, and then I talked to my husband because he's in the corporate world. And I said, what do you think? And he said, double it. I know they'll pay double. And I did, and they didn't even blink. So it's always nice to have that external feedback.
This is nice. Oh, great. Someone asked, you mentioned showing up. Explain to me what you mean by showing up. I think I know, but I'm not quite sure.
Oh, I don't know what context I said that in. Do you remember?
I think you said it's important to show up, be your best,
I don't know.
That's okay.
I mean, obviously it's important to be visible, but I don't remember saying that.
Okay, that's fine. This person writes, we could use the Facebook group or LinkedIn group for a colleague discussion.
Yeah. And so there's a Career Thought Leaders Facebook group. It's open to everyone. And we've been having a pricing discussion. Maybe we'll put out a pricing poll. I could do that in there. I could put out a poll. Yeah, please do. Please ask. Please share. People shared their questions. You can't be confident in what you're pricing if you're doing it in a vacuum. So doing that research and connecting with your colleagues is important.
Great. This person writes, woohoo, this is such a great webinar, Marie and Marie. That's cute. Yes, we are both. Our first names are both Marie. That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. This person says, I wonder how much pricing is related or connected to gender. Interesting question.
Yeah, I haven't found a difference in terms of men and women resisting my pricing. And I see years in the industry impact people's pricing more than gender. A lot of men that charge less. It was a man that called himself the Affordable Career Coach on LinkedIn. So it tends to have more to do with people and how long they've been in the industry. Some people get confident and charge more faster. I've seen that with men and women. So I think some of it has to do with our confidence and how we can work through the mental part of pricing.
Great. This person writes, Marie and Marie, the two of you are so much fun in webinars. Thank you for doing this. This person writes, what's the name of the Facebook page that people have mentioned? Okay.
Career Thought Leaders Facebook page, and then we have a group, and the group is where it's just colleagues. So we're carefully selecting so that we don't get some job seekers in there, and you can really just share with your colleagues. Unfortunately, on LinkedIn, the discussions just weren't good, and our group had a lot of non-career pros in it. So we started a Facebook group for more discussion, and it's going really well. Please join and ask a question.
Great. Okay, everyone, feel free to share your closing thoughts in the comments, or if you have ideas for future webinars, put those in the chat as well. Special thanks to Marie Zimenoff for talking about pricing and packaging for career services. And special thanks to Dr. Sharon Givens for coordinating the webinar. She secured our presenter, Marie Zimenoff, and she invited me to be the moderator and hang out with all of you in the chat. I enjoyed volunteering and spending time with all of you today.
Thank you so
everyone,
much.
Thank you. Any closing thoughts, Marie Zimenoff?
Feel free to email me too. I'd love to hear your questions and be able to share the information that we all need to be more confident in quoting our pricing. So thank you so much, Marie. This was fun.
It was fun. Thank you, Marie. Bye, everyone. Bye.